Imagine just for a second that the absolute, the pure divine source of the entire universe is essentially a sterile ghost.
Right, like a complete void.
Yeah, exactly. A force so unified and perfectly isolated that it's, you know, completely incapable of creating a single thing until it violently fractures itself into opposing forces.
It's a pretty intense image to start with.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack Map 2, Unit 5 from Ben Hott's curriculum. It's Eliphas Levi's School of High Magic.
And this specific unit is called the Macrocosm.
That's the one. And I want to set the hook early here. We are looking at a rigorously intellectual 19th century view of magic, where it's essentially the ultimate mastery of cosmic balance.
Yeah, and Levi is really demanding a complete paradigm shift from you here. He introduces this thing he calls the law of equilibrium.
The law of equilibrium.
Right, which posits that true power, like genuine spiritual agency, it never comes from avoiding conflict.
Or just retreating to one comfortable side of a binary, I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly. True power actually requires occupying the exact center point between massive opposing forces. It's about, holding your ground in this space of immense tension.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand why a practitioner has to balance these forces, we need to look at Levi's foundational argument.
The argument for why the universe even has to be divided in the first place.
Right, why does it have to be opposites? Because he claims right out of the gate that pure unity, the absolute, cannot actually be comprehended.
It's impossible to grasp in a vacuum.
Yeah, he calls this state of pure unity a sterile monarch until it produces an opposition.
Hmm.
But I mean, if the absolute is perfection, why are we calling it sterile? Doesn't sterile sort of imply a flaw?
Well, that perceived lack is actually the core of his whole philosophical engine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Levi is arguing that perfection without dimension is, well, it's functionally indistinguishable from nothingness.
Like it doesn't even exist.
Basically, if there is only the absolute, there's no scale, there's no perspective, no movement.
So a sterile monarch rules over an empty kingdom.
Exactly, because there are no subjects to receive the rulings. For the divine source to actually experience itself, to become dynamic rather than static, it has to create a mirror.
It has to generate another.
Right. It has to have something to reflect off of.
I've been trying to visualize this, and the closest I can get is imagining a perfectly blank, brilliantly white canvas.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. It represents absolute uniform potential, but because it's entirely unbroken, you can't actually see a painting.
The potential is there, but the art itself is sterile.
Exactly. And the very second you introduce a single dark mark, like a stark contrast or a duality, suddenly the canvas has depth.
You've shattered the unity, but you've birthed reality.
Yes, you have to break the canvas to make the art.
And that visual of shattering unity is, it's incredibly apt, especially when we look at the linguistics Levi relies on to build this case.
He goes deep into the roots of the words, doesn't he?
He really does. Consider the word manifestation. It derives from the Latin manifestus, which literally translates to caught in the hand.
Caught in the hand. Wow.
The philosophical implication there is just massive. The moment the absolute becomes something you can grasp, something you can define or point to, it instantly loses that pure, infinite isolation.
Because it's now bounded by the limits of your hand, metaphorically speaking.
Exactly. It becomes a distinct object separated from everything else.
So the very act of defining something, of even talking about it,
Right.
forces it into a duality. You literally can't hold the infinite.
You can't. And this raises an important question, which is, how does the human mind itself trigger this fracture just by observing
But
it?
just by looking at the canvas.
Levi weaves this concept of the idea into the mechanism. If you look at the Greek root for idea, it's eidon, meaning to see, or an appearance.
Okay, so the visual aspect again.
Yeah. The mere act of thinking about pure unity instantly splits reality into two distinct camps. On one side, you have the observer, your consciousness.
And on the other side, you have the observed object, which is the idea of unity itself. So the moment I try to comprehend the void, my consciousness acts as that dark mark on the canvas. I've broken the absolute just by looking at it.
You force it into duality. And Levi is drawing directly from a really deep well of Neoplatonism here.
Plotinus, right?
Yeah, the philosophy of Plotinus, where the one is so radically transcendent that you can't even say it exists.
Wait, really? You can't even say it exists?
Because if you say the one exists, you are implying a distinction between the concept of the one and the concept of existence. You've made two things.
Oh, wow. That is a brain bender.
It is. And Levi maps this Neoplatonic paradox directly onto the Kabbalistic tree of life, specifically the transition from Kether down to Chokmah and Bina.
Okay, let's slow down on those terms for a second for anyone listening, because the mechanics of that transition seem super crucial to Levi's system. Kether is the crown, right? That singularity at the very top of the tree.
Yes. Kether is the pure, undifferentiated potential. It is the sterile monarch we were talking about.
Right.
But to create the universe, Kether has to overflow, and this overflow becomes Chokmah.
Which represents what, exactly?
It's primordial, uncontained, dynamic energy. It's often characterized as the masculine force of just raw expansion.
Okay, but raw expansion without boundaries is basically just chaos, right? It would just dissipate into nothing.
Exactly. So that energy must be caught and structured by Bina, which is the primordial receptacle or the feminine principle of form and restriction.
So you have the ultimate push and the ultimate pull.
Right.
Chokmah is the explosion, and Bina is the heavy container that gives the explosion a shape.
And that dynamic tension right between the explosion and the container, that is what actually gets the cosmic gears turning.
That makes so much sense.
And Levi, who is heavily influenced by the mystic Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, takes this deeply abstract philosophy and gives it a highly pragmatic twist.
Because a lot of earlier esoteric thinkers, they looked at this primordial fracture, this fall from unity into duality, as a tragedy, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. They saw it as a cosmic flaw to be mourned. Like, oh no, we broke the perfect unity.
Right. But Levi looks at it completely differently.
He looks at it and says, no, this fracture is actually the magician's workbench.
The magician's workbench. I love that framing. It completely reframes the whole goal of the practitioner for you.
It really does.
You aren't trying to magically glue the universe back together into this blank white canvas. You were supposed to use the friction.
Exactly. Any act of creation requires breaking the piece of the void. If you want to, write a manifesto or cast a circle or direct the forces of nature...
You can't just sit there in a meditative state of singular unity.
No. You must leverage polarity. You need the negative and positive poles of a magnet to generate an actual working current.
And the magician stands right in the space between those poles.
And builds reality out of their friction.
Okay, so that brings us directly into how Levi visualizes this cosmic friction, right?
No, yeah.
He maps this dynamic using the concept of the macrocosm.
Yes. And the term itself is important. It comes from the Greek macros, meaning large, wedded to cosmos.
And cosmos didn't just mean space back then, did it?
No, it's vital to remember that classical thinkers didn't use cosmos just to mean everything out there in the dark. They used it specifically to describe an ordered, beautifully adorned, and highly structured system.
An ordered system.
And the beauty of that system, for Levi, is found entirely in the strict mathematical balance of those opposing forces.
Which brings us to the interlaced triangles.
Right. Commonly known as the Seal of Solomon or the hexagram.
And this is a symbol that, let's be honest, often carries a ton of baggage.
Oh, yeah. Decades of Hollywood movies haven't helped.
Right. We usually see it depicted in these old, dusty, medieval grimoires as a tool for summoning demons or protecting the summoner.
But Levi is operating in a post-Enlightenment world. He's stripping away all that superstition to talk purely about cosmic mechanics.
He discards the parlor tricks entirely.
Exactly. For Levi, the hexagram is actually a schematic diagram. It shows you how to direct the astral light.
The astral light. That's the core engine of his magical theory, isn't it?
It is. It's the great plastic medium, the cosmic fluid that mediates between pure spirit and dense matter.
It's basically the raw material that the magician's will actually shapes.
Yes, and the interlaced triangles show us exactly how this light moves.
So let's break that schematic down for the listener. We have two intersecting triangles.
Right.
The ascending triangle points upward, and Levi describes this as the sulfurous ascent of human consciousness and human will, sort of reaching up toward the divine.
While the descending triangle, the one pointing down, represents the divine influx.
Okay.
It is the downpouring of celestial grace, crystallizing and condensing into material reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Since Levi doesn't spend his time analyzing the complex web of intersecting lines in the middle of the hexagram.
No, he doesn't care about the messy middle lines.
Right. He directs our attention specifically to the opposing points. The single apex at the very top of the ascending triangle and the single apex at the very bottom of the descending one.
And what's fascinating here is his intense focus on those sharp, extreme vertices. In the Kabbalistic vocabulary, that topmost point represents Kether.
The supreme crown of pure spirit we talk about.
Exactly. And the bottommost point represents Malkuth, which is the absolute finality of dense physical manifestation.
So by highlighting these opposing extremes,
Mhm.
Levi is illustrating what we can call a violent geometry.
Violent geometry. I mean, that implies this isn't some peaceful Zen-like balance.
It sounds incredibly volatile.
Because it is, these points are fundamentally antagonistic. Pure spirit and dense matter are basically threatening to pierce each other.
Like two spears pointed at each other's tips.
Exactly. The equilibrium of the universe only holds because of the immense crushing tension between these two extremes.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Levi's historical context is super essential here, right?
Oh, completely. You have to remember he is writing in the aftermath of the French Revolution's failure to create this perfect utopia.
Right.
And he is watching the rise of a cold, mechanistic, scientific materialism that treats the universe as just a dead machine.
So people felt entirely stripped of their spiritual agency. But, returning to the blind, passive faith of the medieval church just wasn't an option for a 19th century intellectual.
No, they needed something robust. He needed to construct a framework where spiritual power was active, rigorous, and really demanding.
So magic, in this violent geometry, is basically the art of managing polarization.
Exactly. Think about when you experience cognitive dissonance, when you hold two conflicting truths in your mind simultaneously.
It's super uncomfortable. Most people just rush to destroy one of the truths to relieve the psychological pressure.
Right, we just pick a side. But Levi says the magician does the exact opposite.
You don't eliminate the shadow, and you don't dissolve completely into the blinding light.
You master the exact point of tension where they collide. And you use that immense pressure to mold the astral light.
Wow. Okay, so we have this massive, volatile schematic out there in the stars, the macrocosm. But Levi doesn't just leave the law of equilibrium out in the cosmos, does he?
Not at all. He brings it right down to earth.
He transitions directly into the microcosm. He takes this violent geometry and maps it onto human anatomy.
Which is brilliant.
It really is. The
Yes.
physical body basically becomes a mystical text that the practitioner has to decode.
His anatomical synthesis is arguably one of the most brilliant parts of the entire unit. He begins by invoking the concept of primitive man.
Which he equates with the Kabbalistic figure of Adam Kadmon.
Yes.
And Adam Kadmon is often described as the primordial androgynous human, right?
Right, but not in a literal biological sense. It represents an ontological state of supreme wholeness.
Before the monad fractured into the dualistic warfare of our current reality.
Exactly. It's humanity containing both masculine and feminine polarities, perfectly balanced within a single entity.
So it's the ultimate blueprint of equilibrium.
But as we exist now, immersed in the physical world, our bodies reflect the primordial fracture.
They're broken.
Yeah. Levi points to our dual organs as the literal physical manifestation of this fall into duality.
We have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms, 2 lungs.
And this binary flesh represents our total immersion in the world of action, choice, and consequence.
We're constantly forced to navigate between the left and the right.
Just walking is a controlled fall between left and right.
That's a great point. And in the Kabbalistic framework, this corresponds to the 2 outer pillars of the tree of life.
Yes, exactly.
On one side, you have the pillar of mercy,
Mhm.
spearheaded by Cheesed, representing expansion, compassion, and giving.
And on the other side, you have the pillar of severity, spearheaded by Javura, representing restriction, judgment, and limitation.
So navigating a physical life requires constant oscillation between those dualities.
Because you can't just expand infinitely without exhausting yourself.
Right. And you can't restrict constantly without basically suffocating.
Exactly. The dual organs are the tools we use to negotiate this constant push and pull. But Levi doesn't stop at the binary flesh.
This is the part I love. He identifies a few rare, singular organs that refuse duplication.
His anatomical mysticism.
Yeah. It completely recontextualizes how you view your own body, because these singular organs form what he considers an internal axis mundi.
A central pole or pillar running straight through the chaotic dualities of the human frame.
The singular organs anchor the tension.
They do. And what's fascinating here is how he begins his decoding. He starts with the nose.
But wait, if we're looking for a singular axis, why start with a feature that has 2 nostrils? Isn't that just another duality?
It definitely appears that way superficially. But the function of the organ is entirely singular.
Oh, I see.
The nose represents the continuous unified respiration of the divine pneuma.
Pneuma. That is the Greek concept of breath or spirit, right?
Yes. Which corresponds directly to the Hebrew roof, the active, animating breath of life.
So our 2 lungs might physically process the air, But the intake of that singular unifying current of spirit is what actually animates the dual body.
Without that central pillar of breath, drawing the raw material from the astral light, the binary body is just a static corpse.
So the breath pulls in the raw energetic material. But breathing is totally passive. If the nose intakes the raw material, how does the magician actually shape it?
Because Levi certainly doesn't advocate for just sitting and breathing.
Definitely not.
So he moves immediately to the instrument of shaping, which is the tongue.
Ah, the tongue.
The tongue is the singular fleshy instrument of the logos, the creative word.
Its role is to translate formless inner thought into objective outer reality.
Through the mechanism of vibration.
The mechanism of vibration is fascinating. If you think about the human intellect, it is relentlessly dualistic.
Oh, we're always divided.
Right, we are constantly second-guessing ourselves, weighing opposing options, oscillating between fear and desire.
It's exhausting.
It is. It's like our thoughts are two oars on a rowboat, wildly splashing and pulling in totally different directions.
I love that analogy.
But the tongue acts as the singular rudder.
Yes. The spoken word collapses the duality of thought into a singular directed action.
So when a practitioner vibrates a word of power, or simply speaks an intention with absolute will, they are using that singular rudder to strike the astral light.
They are sending a focus current through the plastic medium of the universe to manifest an actual change.
The dual thoughts are synthesized by the singular tongue.
Perfectly said. And after the tongue, he moves down to an anatomical feature that, honestly, it kind of surprised me.
The umbilicus, right. The belly button.
Yeah, but the inclusion makes perfect sense when you trace the etymology.
Right, because umbilicus in Latin refers to the central boss of a shield.
That exact center point that deflects incoming blows. Philosophically, it was used to describe the center of the world.
So Levi shifts his metaphor here from the mechanics of breath and speech to the mechanics of generation and lineage.
It is our physical scar.
Wow. The belly button is the permanent fleshy reminder right on the center of our bodies that we were once entirely tethered to an undivided source.
I'm a mother.
Right, before we were severed and forced to become these separate, dualistic individuals.
It is the literal scar of the magician's workbench.
That is such a powerful image. It acts as our physical center of gravity.
A biological monument to the primordial fracture.
Right.
And finally, Levi culminates this anatomical axis with something that isn't a human body part at all.
He transitions from physical flesh to a purely metaphysical symbol, doesn't he?
He does. He points to the Kabbalistic yod.
The letter yod. It is the smallest character in the Hebrew alphabet. It's essentially just a suspended point or like a tiny comma.
But it's so important.
But how does a letter function as the final anchor of a physical axis?
Well, because the yod is the graphic seed from which every other Hebrew letter is constructed.
Oh, I see.
In the Tetragrammaton, the ineffable name of God, the yod is the first letter, representing the initial, concentrated spark of divine emanation.
So metaphysically, Levi uses the yod to signify the macrocosmic phallus.
Right. It is the concentrated point of generative power.
The divine spark of Chokmah that acts as the energetic seed for the entire system.
Exactly. So when you stack this architecture together,
The continuous intake of spirit at the nose.
the vibratory direction of the logos at the tongue,
The central anchor of our severed origin at the umbilicus.
and the generative metaphysical seed of the yod.
You construct a straight, vertical line of immense power running directly down the center of the human frame.
You have constructed the middle pillar of divine synthesis within yourself.
Wow.
Levi is arguing that the human being is not just some biological organism subject to the whims of nature.
The human being is a living talisman.
We are perfectly engineered to stand right between the crushing pillars of mercy and severity.
Drawing power from both sides while remaining anchored to a singular divine axis. So what does this all mean? We've traced the law of equilibrium from the absolute fracturing itself into a blank canvas through the violent cosmic geometry of the interlaced triangles, all the way down to the breath in our lungs and the scars on our stomachs.
It's quite a journey.
It is. How does this theoretical architecture actually translate to the goal of the practitioner?
It all culminates in the overarching purpose of Levi's entire curriculum, which is the execution of the great work.
The great work.
Levi emphasizes repeatedly that high magic is never a violation of natural law. It is the absolute conscious fulfillment of it.
Right.
The great work is achieved by intentionally directing the astral light to elevate oneself in reality. But here is the crux of the whole unit.
Okay.
You cannot command that immense external cosmic fluid if you are internally unbalanced.
You have to master the microcosm before you can influence the macrocosm.
Precisely. If you are swept away by the dualities of existence, like if you obsessively cling to the light while ignoring your shadow,
Or if you practice merciless severity without an ounce of compassion.
you lose your footing on the middle pillar. The astral light will control you rather than you controlling it.
So true power is achieved only when you can occupy that central point of synthesis.
Maintaining the violent tension of both opposing forces within your own consciousness without breaking.
It is about choosing to stand firmly in the dead center of the storm and actually using the rotational force of the hurricane to power your own engine.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And that brings us perfectly back to Levi's foundational premise, the primordial fracture, the friction between opposites, is the magician's workbench.
You actually have to split the sky in two to create anything of lasting value.
The tension isn't the obstacle. The tension is the raw material.
Exactly.
So as you go about your day, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We all deal with cognitive dissonance, conflicting desires, and opposing pressures in our lives.
It's unavoidable.
Right. So consider the specific tensions you are facing right now. Where are you exhausting your own energy, trying to magically erase a conflict, hoping to return to a state of sterile, blank canvas peace?
And what would happen if you just stopped trying to escape it?
Because if Levi is right, that exact point of tension, that violent friction you keep trying to avoid, might actually be the workbench where your greatest power is waiting to be built.
A truly vital framework for navigating any challenge.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Levi's macrocosm. Keep questioning the binaries, keep finding your balance in the tension, and we'll see you next time.
I was chasing perfect lines in the sand, trying to hold lightning in one hand. Every answer split into another name. Every fire found another flame. Thought I had to choose the dark or